Have you ever paid attention to this little knob on your miter saw, or what it's even used for? Have you ever even noticed that it was there? Well, I'm going to show you what it's used for. Alright, as we can see, this knob turns, and as you're turning it, the bottom of the screw starts to go down. And where it's headed to is a base plate set up on your miter saw. So when I lower this, we're going to have a stop. So wherever I lower this screw down to, however deep I go with it, the miter saw will go down further. So if we bring it all the way back up, the miter saw has its full potential. However, if we drop it to a certain depth, it'll stop, and as you can see, the blade does not go all the way down. So what is the point of having this knob if the blade can't go all the way down? This will assist you in cutting half lap joints. For half lap joints, we typically go to the table saw, and you can either use your table saw blade, the standard one that's in there, and make multiple passes, or we can go to a dado stack. Now what a dado stack does, it creates wider cuts at once, depending on how many blades and chippers that you put inside for your dado stack. The issue with the dado stack is it takes some time to put together to be able to set up for your half lap joints. So a lot of people take the easy way of making multiple cuts with the table saw blade. With the table saw blade, it's the same thickness as a miter saw blade. We're going to go ahead and use the miter saw to make half lap joints. Alright, to make a half lap joint, what I want to do is to be able to fit this piece of wood within this piece of wood at either the edge, a middle, or a separate portion within the board, depending on the project. The way to make this happen is we need to make a marking. That marking will fall the thickness of the board. That is what our width is for the miter saw. I also need to know the thickness of where I'm going with it. So you want to find the middle point of the thickness of your wood. Once the middle is found of your board, I'm going to move that measurement to the edge of the board. And the reason I want to do that is because I want my miter saw blade to bottom out with this line. So what I want to do with this measurement that I made on the end, I don't want to put the piece of wood against the fence. Because if you notice, the backside of the teeth of the blade are raised higher than the middle portion of the blade. This is obviously lower towards the base, and this is higher. So if I have my piece so far against the fence, it's not going to be measured out right, and you're going to get a higher cut on one of the half lap joints. So what I want to do is I want to bring the piece of wood close to that line, and then I'm going to drop the knob until it bottoms out with that plate. Now this doesn't have to be perfectly accurate when you first start this, as long as you're getting close. And as you can see, my miter saw will no longer go any further. Now I can't see my line from the left side of the miter saw, but what I can do is hold my miter saw down with my one hand and maneuver the knob so slightly until the miter saw rises up to the line or lowers down to the line. So let's start this from the beginning. I'm going to place the piece of wood in the middle of the blade. Obviously, my blade cannot move any further down because of the knob, so I'm going to hold the miter saw blade down, and I'm going to adjust the knob until that bottom tooth touches the line. That is right where I want to be. So our goal now is to have the miter saw cut out the width of the half lap joint. However, we cannot do it this way because the teeth of the backside of the miter saw are raised up higher than the middle portion. That is going to create a raise on the backside of your half lap joint. We can easily turn that around and fix it. However, you may still have a raise in the middle of your half lap joint, which won't be perfectly flat. So the way around this is we want to make sure we put a sacrificial fence against the fence of the miter saw and hold it down with what you would usually use for stop blocks for your clamp. Make sure that this is flushed against the fence. After this is in place, we're going to move the piece that we need to cut against the sacrificial fence as if it is now the fence of the miter saw. What that's going to allow us to do is have a better reach for the miter saw blade for the middle portion to maneuver between that half lap joint. What I want to do with this cut is not cut directly on the line. I want to cut within the line. That way I have a nice tight squeeze with the half lap joints. If for whatever reason I need to cut out more, it's as easy as bringing it back to here and trimming out the rest. Okay, as you can see here, after the cuts were made, we still have a little bit of pieces left that need to be flattened out. You can do two things to clean this up. One, you can use a chisel, or two, we can quickly use this on the miter saw, and as long as you're careful, maintain pressure against the sacrificial fence, and we can maneuver this board left and right. Now I was able to clean up that half lap joint without bringing out a chisel. So as you can see here, our board is a little bit wider than the half lap joint, which is perfectly fine, and that was purposely done so that I can make the final cut right where I need to. It's not even half a blade thick that I need to cut off. I'm just going to make that quick marking, and I'm going to take it back to the miter saw, and I'm going to finish it off. So what I need to do next is make my markings for the thickness of the board. And it's not this piece that needs to get cut out, which even though it looks like it would be this piece, it is not this piece that needs to get cut. It's actually the remaining piece that needs to get cut. So once I have this down and my lines to where they're at, I could take this off. I can use a measuring tool or some sort of straight edge. So with that being said, I'm going to take my measuring tool again just to double check and make sure that everything is lined up. I'm going to take this measurement and I'm going to transition it over to the edge again. It's kind of hard doing this around the camera. This is the depth that I want the saw blades to be at. So we're going to take the saw blade again, and we're going to make sure that the bottom tooth bottoms out with that bottom line. Now we have the ability to move the blade back and forth while this piece that we need to cut is against the sacrificial fence. Now I have my lines on this side, but I need to transition them over to this side. And there we have it. We are ready to cut this out. And now we can bring our two pieces back to the table and fit these in to have a nice tight half lap joint. Alright, so again, this was a dry run of using two pieces that were not even measured out properly. We didn't have any precision on the measurements. It was just to show you how the miter saw works with that knob. Now, if this was going to be an actual project, we would definitely be taking a little bit more time on the measurements, on the precision of the markings, on the precision of the blade, however we used it. However, this is just to show you what that knob is actually used for on the miter saw, and it's super simple to use when you're making a quick half lap joint instead of having to set up the table saw with a dado stack. If I were creating many half lap joints, I think a dado stack's definitely going to be a better choice for you. However, if you needed to create a quick one without having to change the table saw blade out, this is the way to go. Hope it worked out for you.